So the walk I'm doing in the Norfolk Broads in this video is 17 kilometres long. It's vaguely in the shape of a cat, as you can see, with its ears at the top of the River Bure there. The walk started in Acle before heading up northwards towards Fishley and Upton. I apologise for the slightly grainy quality of this screen capture. It hasn't translated well to my editing software. But as I said, the walk heads up through South Walsham marshes towards the River Bure, where we can see the remains of St Benet's Abbey over the river, and then we're heading south back towards South Walsham, lovely village. I was going to head north up towards Ranworth, but I decided to head south due to poor timekeeping, which I'll explain later. But this was a good opportunity to come to North Birmingham, St Andrew's Church there, which was wonderful, before heading to Lingwood to get the train back to Norwich. On the edge of the Norfolk Broads, approximately halfway between Norwich and Great Yarmouth, I arrived in the village of Acle just before 10 AM by train from Norwich. The parish church, dedicated to St Edmund, has seen many alterations from the medieval to the modern. A Norman church once stood on this site, evidence of which survives in the doorway fragments built into the rood stair turret in an alcove at the south-east side of the nave. The present building is largely a late medieval rebuild. It is easy to lose track of time in an old building of such great interest, and there are certainly other old parish churches nearby yielding arguably greater treasures than Acle. So to focus on one here, I would look for a selection of special inscriptions. Inscriptions are a recurring feature of St Edmund's Church. The dedication of the font is dated in Latin to 1410. An inscription roughly carved into a windowsill in the north porch says, "God save the King, 1616. The crowning feature of this church, a remarkable Latin inscription written at the time of the Black Death in the 14th century. The inscription reads, "O lamentable death, how many dost thou cast into the pit? Anon the infants fade away, and of the aged death makes an end. Now these, now those, thou ravagest, O death, on every side. Those that wear horns or veils, fate spareth not. Therefore, while in the world the brute beast plague rages hour by hour, with prayer and with remembrance deplore death's deadliness." Little more than a mile north of Acle, St Mary's Church at Fishley stands isolated among fields. It could truly be a million miles from anywhere. From the churchyard to the northeast, the open country drops away to marshes and the edge of the Broads. Many of Norfolk's round church towers are Norman in date, and St Mary's is no exception, although it has a later top, without which it would be invisible behind its guard of trees. St Mary's Church is currently only open to visitors on Fridays, which itself feels like an extraordinary achievement. The rector of the nearby Lingwood benefice, of which this church is not a part, told me the church occasionally hosts weddings, and I can only imagine the experience of such an occasion in this ancient church and its remote setting. For the next part of the walk, I headed through Upton and its marshes to the northwest corner of South Walsham marshes to see the ruins of St Benet's Abbey from the adjacent bank of the River Bure. The ruins of St Benet's Abbey, a former Benedictine foundation, can be accessed via Wroxham and Ludham on the other side of the River Bure. Pre-Reformation monastic activity here is well documented, and the site is steeped in history, and it's central in several folk tales of the Norfolk Broads. The substantial standing remains are the ruins of the 14th century gatehouse and an 18th century drainage mill, which itself became ruinous in the mid-19th century. At South Walsham, within St Mary's churchyard, there stand the remains of a second parish church, this one dedicated to St Lawrence, which today serves its community as St Lawrence's Centre for the Arts. This isn't the only example of parish churches sharing the same consecrated ground. There are half a dozen other occurrences of this in East Anglia alone, and in most instances it can be put down to convenience, born, generally speaking, from the proximity of settlements or medieval manors along parish boundaries. St Mary's Church is, unsurprisingly, largely of the 15th century, with a fine south porch higher than the south aisle and a very large west tower. The interior is that of a pleasant, large country church, tidy and, for all appearances, well maintained. The core of the late medieval seating has long gone, but the decorated bench ends were retained and adapted to fit new benches and backs, equipped with under-pew electric heating. Another fine object is the painted rood screen. In both Latin and English, it asks us to pray for the souls of John Galt and his wives, who gave the gift of a painted screen after John, a serf, had gained his freedom. So I decided to skip going to St Helen's Church at Ranworth, and I also decided to skip going to see the ruined tower at Panksworth, just down the road from Ranworth and South Walsham. Actually, when I got to South Walsham, I decided to just head south towards North Birmingham and see St Andrew's Church, where I am right now. And I am so glad I made that decision, because whilst Ranworth St Helen's Church and its painted rood screen is amazing, I have been there before, and it wouldn't have been anything new. But here, St Andrew's Church, I haven't been before, and it is open, and I am so glad I made that decision, because it also has a painted rood screen. The dado panels along here are absolutely out of this world. I haven't seen them before, like I said. It's also got a great angel ceiling as well in the nave, and there's a good screen down at the west end, just across the tower arch. So after here, I'm going to go very quickly see the church at Lingwood, and then it'll be back to Norwich. But if you are interested in seeing some Ranworth images, I can put some up at the end of this video from when I visited on one of my last trips to North Norfolk. At St Andrew's Church in North Birmingham, you are in the company of angels. The church was well furnished in the years leading up to the Reformation, a spectacular setting for the liturgy of the late medieval church. Although its present character is partially the result of more recent alteration, it is still a staggering interior with several captivating features, some great and some small. The 15th century nave roof with wonderful bosses and winged angels overlook two screens, one between the tower crossing, believed to have come from a redundant church in the same village dedicated to St Edmund, and the present chancel screen is thought to be the latest dated screen surviving in a Norfolk church from 1536. The roster of saints painted on the dado register in exquisite detail are exceptional works of medieval art. Despite vandalism at the iconoclast's hand, they are arguably all the more interesting as examples of art under attack. Like St Edmund Church at Acle, the parish church at Lingwood is an aisleless, but by no means an understated building. Similarly again to the parish church at Acle, the interior of St Peter's Lingwood is whitewashed and very bright, but unlike Acle, I found it to be less charming and absent of the qualities that add to the special character of Acle's parish church. St Peter's Church offers zero space for circulation, and it is unsurprising that overflow contributed to the church room extension built onto the north side of the nave in the early 2000s. The church is set within a very broad curtilage with many fine headstones and gravestones of various ages in the south aspect, and it was very pleasing to see the community out using the church to enjoy the building and its grounds.